I want to thank them for joining us this evening as Street Soldiers Radio celebrates Indigenous Peoples Day. And I have only met these folks over the phone. I got it from a reliable source that they are all wonderful people. And that's all we have on Street Soldiers. is wonderful people. So
thank you for joining us, y'all.
And they are joining us from different time zones, one on the West Coast, one, we'll find out where they are. One is very late. So let's jump into it. And let me first welcome, just wave your hand so everybody know who you are. We have Victoria, and if I don't say your name right, say it for me. Victoria Montano, is that right, Victoria? Thank you. You are in the Bay Area. I have Witko, right?
Yeah. Right.
And I have Chief Iron Eyes. I'm Chase. I'm saying Chief Chase. Chase Iron Eyes. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you. Victoria, you're in the Bay. Witko, where are you?
Hey,
I'm actually.
Yeah, sorry. I'm in the area. Sorry. Yeah, I'm in the East Bay.
Okay, and Witko, say where are you again right now?
Right now, I'm in Pine Ridge, South Dakota.
All right, you're in South Dakota, and Chase, you are.
I'm in the Haudenosaunee land, the Iroquois Nation, out Niagara Falls, very near Niagara Falls.
All right, you're in the Eastern time zone. So let me begin by just saying what I think is common knowledge to everyone, that President Joe Biden on Friday became the first president to commemorate Indigenous Peoples Day, hailing Native Americans' strength and resilience. Since time immemorial, American Indians, Alaska Natives, and Native Hawaiians have built vibrant and diverse cultures, safeguarding land, language, spirit, knowledge, and tradition across the generations. Biden wrote in his proclamation, for generations, federal policies systemically sought to assimilate and displace Native people and eradicate Native cultures. Today, we recognize Indigenous people's resilience and strength, as well as the immeasurable positive impact that they have made on every aspect of American society. Very nice, because obviously Indigenous Peoples Day has replaced Columbus Day, who didn't discover nothing, but well, I will try. I'm not going to spend this evening knocking Columbus, but I'm just glad that we don't celebrate anymore. So let's get your first reactions, Victoria, just to hearing that, celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day and hearing what the president said. How do you feel about that? It being an official holiday now.
Hi, well, first and foremost, thank you for having me tonight. And like I mentioned, I am calling in from East Oakland, the village of Huchin, the traditional territory of the Lishan Ohlone. And, I feel like there's Indigenous Peoples Days, but a lot of us are still fighting in the front lines, fighting pipelines, protecting sacred sites. So yes, it's a holiday, and it has been, it's important to celebrate Indigenous Peoples Day, but I feel like the struggle continues. So that's pretty much how I feel about it, honestly. Like, it's just a holiday. There's people that are still like facing charges, like for wanting to.
Don't worry, we're gonna get into that. We just want your opening statement. We got plenty of time for the in-depth statement. Okay.
Good.
What you feeling about the holiday itself and it being celebrated? Witko.
I'm from Pine Ridge, South Dakota. I'm Ogla Lakota. Go by he, him, his. And as far as Columbus, Biden, those conversations go, I think it's okay to express your opinion and how you feel, especially in these times. And I urge Biden to stop line 3. That's my entering statement.
Yeah, all right. All right, Chase, your feeling about the holiday?
You know what? Symbology what human beings are asked to celebrate and to honor, that forms identities and cultures and the way that we are interacting with each other in this country. So I second those two motions. I also recognize that we have an opportunity to always reach, people that might not be paying attention. But if the president of the United States is saying it, or a governor or whatever, then we're doing this show. You know what I mean? Like we have these opportunities to share the truth, and this country is ready for the truth, or ready or not, the truth is unearthing itself.
And I just want your reaction to that, because I remember how long folks worked to get Martin Luther King's birthday to be a holiday, or, to get somebody on a stamp. Obviously it may not change any conditions, right. but the recognition meant a lot to the people that work hard to get the day. So I just wanted your feelings on that. And you're right, we wouldn't be doing this show like this, Chase, if it wasn't for the fact that this day is officially being celebrated. But more importantly for me personally, it just says, it moves the other one out of the picture. The whole 1492 Columbus held the ocean blue, which I learned back in elementary. But what always got me about this, and I wasn't gonna say anything, but I'm a little kid, right? And I'm like, I always use the word discovered. And I was like, wait a minute, I may be 9 years old, but how do you discover something that's already there? And that was just always my logical thing as a little boy. How you gonna discover, it's like, you can't discover something that's already there. And I knew about Native Americans. So, why did this dude get credit? And then, of course, I read some other books, as I grew and learned. I remember one of the books I read was a book by Ivan Van Sertima called They Came Before Columbus. And it was it was in my conscious developing days, when I went from oh God, Africans came over here and there's Olmec statues in, South America and all that. So they didn't discover anything. So to me, that's the bigger thing here. Let's just get this thing right. And that's my feeling about it. So,
they discovered capitalism. That's what they discovered, but whatever.
Well,
okay.
Yes. Okay. All right. Okay. There's a whole lot we can say about that. Victoria, why don't you just jump in and tell us a little bit about, the work you're doing, where you're from, your upbringing, your personal story. We'll get a little, and then we'll go to each one of you, and then we'll have a conversation amongst all about the plight of Native people. So just talk about where you're from, where you're born, the whole bit. Go ahead, Victoria.
All right. My people are Yoeme from Texas, and I'm a first generation Two-Spirit, indigenous relative, born and raised in East Oakland, in Highland Hospital. So I pretty much grew up here all my life, and I grew up pretty much not knowing who I was until my grandmother was like, we're basically like Yaqui, and Yoem is a traditional name for Yaqui. Yaqui was just a generic term that was given to our people, and even then, I'm still in the process of figuring out who I am. In the last 3 years, I had the honor to be a part of Sigorte Land Trust, the first urban indigenous women-led land trust, under the leadership of Karina Gould, the Lashana Loney spiritual leader, and Janella LaRose. And they are two incredible matriarchs who's been working really hard for the last 20 plus years in the East Bay, trying to protect sacred sites. And here in the East Bay, even in San Francisco area, in the Bay Area, there are sacred spaces, burial grounds are called shell mounds. And a lot of these shell mounds have been desecrated, and a lot of them are still here. So even until this day, they're still been fighting to protect their sacred sites. And particularly the closest one that you guys probably have heard about, or is the West Berkeley Shell Mound. They've been in the process of trying to protect that sacred site. So I know Karina since I was a really young teenager, really troubled young teenager here growing up in East Oakland. And she worked at my high school, and they just kind of like took me in, where like, she was my mentor, and like her daughters are like my sisters, and they basically we basically grew up with each other, and I kind of got pulled into the work. And being an Indigenous person, it just kind of felt like, it feels kind of like a duty, like I'm here like living on unceded Ohlone territory. So I just feel like I'm kind of a traveler inhabiting this body, and I feel like I can't really like leave this earth, or I can't live my life without like trying to like, be of service to the people of this land. And the Bay Area is an incredible place. Like a lot of grassroots movement have started here. Like, the land was abundant and still is abundant. And through the work of Segor Talantras, we've been able to facilitate land return back to Indigenous stewardship. And we're like an intertribal organization. And so a lot of us, like, it was our first time, like putting our hands in the soil. And we've been able to tend to pieces of land that have been returned back here in the East Bay. And mostly the pieces of land that got returned back were like completely trashed. There was a piece that was returned back in deep East Oakland, behind Planting Justice Nursery, a group of folks who helps like facilitate, the return of young Black and Brown incarcerated folks from the prison system. So they went out to Standing Rock, and through the Standing Rock movement, they came back and they were like, how can we, support the Indigenous people of this land? And they returned that land. And Karina was like, yo, like, Vic, do you want to be a part of this dream? And I just, just kind of fell back and trusted the ancestors. And I'm like, yeah, I want to be a part of this dream. And over the last 3 years, I've been able to tap in with my traditional medicines and been able to tap in through land work. And it's just been an incredible experience, just to be able to tap in with the land and just be of service. But other than that, I'm a multimedia artist. And
well, don't worry, we got plenty of time. You don't have to get it all out now. Because I do want to hear as much about the work as possible. And in fact, this triggers some questions that I may want to ask down the line, and maybe ladies tell also. So thank you. But born and raised here. Thank you. Witko. And before I go to Witko, let me just say that I got to give Larry Dorsey a huge shout out, because I called Larry, and, LD is our board operator when we're in the studio, when we do Street Soldiers on KMEL. Larry's right there. And Larry talked about his native heritage all the time. So I said, Larry, you got some folks that we want to do a show celebrating the day. And he said, Witko. And then I ended up talking to Witko and said, I got somebody else for you. So, just thank you. So Witko, go ahead. Talk a little bit about yourself.
Hey, how are you guys doing? My name is Witko. I'm a Native American. I'm Oglala Lakota specifically. I'm from Pine Ridge, South Dakota, born and raised. I was born in 1990 in Pine Ridge, South Dakota. For anybody who knows, I was basically born in the resistance. We are right beneath the Mount Rushmore. I'm Crazy Horse's people. So I'm very proud, and I connected with Larry, just connecting with Afro-Indigenous and Latino Indigenous relatives, and we're like-minded folks. So, just we were involved in a lot of activism in our early 20s, and that's how I got out to the Bay. My mother was actually born in the Bay, so I love the Bay, and just influenced by everything that's going on since the 73 resistance, as well as our past here in Pine Ridge with the U.S. government. So I appreciate you guys for, bringing me on, or thinking to bring me on. celebrating Indigenous Peoples Day, a lot of people get they don't feel too well about America. Not a lot of people love America due to the past. So I don't blame them, but also it's a good day to support Native business. It's a good day to support Afro-Indigenous business. A good day to support Latino Indigenous business, for-profit, nonprofits. It is a good day you could celebrate, and it's a win at the end of the day. It's a win because F Columbus, right? That's how we feel.
And you have a lot of talent yourself. I mean, you right? You do a bunch of different things, right? Am
I dabble in some things. I use a lot of my multimedia art. Like I do, NFTs now, which is really fun. I'm encouraging the communities here in Pine Ridge to get into digital currencies. Just from what I've been learning when I traveled the world. But other than that, I am a grassroots activist. I do get on the ground, and I have been on the ground, and I actually have met a lot of beautiful people on the ground. There's a lot of LGBTQ plus out there fighting right now for Line 3. I made it out there to see them. And Biden did acknowledge us, which was cool. But yeah, we are using a lot of our art and music. There's movies happening now. Natives making films, which is beautiful. It's a real beautiful time. It's a beautiful time, and it's a beautiful day to be Indigenous.
Thank you, Witko. Thank you. And Chase?
Wow. You know what? I was born there in the Black Hills, which is the spiritual epicenter of the Lakota Nation and other Native nations. And then my mom moved me to the Standing Rock Nation, or the Standing Rock Reservation. The word reservation is we were confined to these places, and Pine Ridge is known as a POW camp. And that's where I live now. I spent the first 20 years of my life on the Standing Rock. That's where Sitting Bull's people made it to, and now they live in different places because of like the Wounded Knee massacre of 1890. And that's why I'm in Niagara Falls, because there's a monument to one of the soldiers who got one of the 20 medals of honor for an act of genocide, a slaughtering of unarmed women and children and elders, and very, very few fighting men, people whose responsibility it was to protect and defend our sovereignty and our authorities, our ability to navigate existence on our own terms. And we all come from oppressed demographics. We're all born into either a legacy of oppression and everything, all the challenges that come with being born into that, demographics that were racially subjugated, and the working class families of what is now called America, they are also oppressed, and some of them are white folks, but certainly we don't make light of slavery, of genocide, of the doctrine of discovery, of apartheid. For us who are born into the oppressed side, or to the wrong side of privilege, you know what I mean? We know the pain of our lives and that life. And now what I see happening, I mean, when George Floyd was killed, it was in Minneapolis, and that place is heavy duty Indian country, indigenous country. But this country has not reconciled, has not had the reckoning that a colonial country like ours, that denies the truth to its citizens, its peoples, and doesn't tell them the truth about what this country has done and continues to do is asking for trouble. And we almost burned this whole country to the ground when George Floyd was killed. So it's a step that somebody like the president of the United States, it doesn't matter who's in there, whether it's the red team or the blue team, that's the least that they could do.
Mm-hmm.
The least that they could do is appoint Deb Haaland as the Secretary of the Interior so that we can see some changes in indigenous people's lives. No matter if they live on these places of confinement, which are now our homelands, or in the treaty territories, in the urban areas, in the urban centers, interfacing with all these other people. Part of my work is building those bridges, and I'm committed to that. There's certain pillars that guide our work, and one of them is land back, of course, in a time of climate crisis and COVID, the global pandemic, just challenging all of us, bringing us into direct confrontation with our limited time here, recognizing right away that life is precious and that we respect life and we want to live. That is a worldview that takes courage to respect life and to want to live, because everything that surrounds us is telling us something different. So for us to be here, for indigenous peoples to be here and to be going forward in the spirit of spiritual liberation and trying to uplift those who are still oppressed to this day, it's a testament to our undying spirit. This is not only evident in the land back prophecy, the land back movement, but what's happening with the reclamation of indigenous agency. We've not been able to tell our own stories for the longest time. We don't control that money in those institutions of media, in Hollywood, in education, in the government, places of laws, economics, and politics. And we know that we're not there yet, but we've all now been to the mountaintop and we can see the promised land, just like Brother Martin Luther King said, and we have to walk there together and demand that reality right now. So, you know what? My work takes many forms. I'm just blessed to be able to share a little bit and to continue on this path.
Amen. I want to say, or Amen Ra, or any other way you say it. I want to ask each of you about the, and this is an individual thing, but I just want to ask you the question about identity. And and I'll use, obviously I know Black people the best, and myself more than anything else. The search for identity, or not knowing history and not knowing everything, having to unlearn everything that I learned before, and then was huge for me personally. Stumbled on it in a book somewhere, which led me a whole bunch of other books, which led me obviously to connections across the Atlantic and so on and so forth and so on forth, and basically fueled my worldview of everything. Has it been a struggle for you individually, or did you always know right from the beginning? Did you have those connections? Were they handed down through family, or were you, cut off? Each of you, your own personal story. I'm just fascinated how much that means to you. So anybody can just jump in and share their thoughts about identity and culture. Somebody's got to say something. We on the ring. We on TV.
I'll go very quickly. Oh, you got this, brother?
Kola, should we let the our relative go first?
That'll be good.
Vicky, if you want to go first.
Okay, I could go first. That's fine. Thank you. I was like, well, I think I talked a lot already. um,
No, thank you.
Oh,
well, for me, it has been a huge struggle, you know, like growing up in an urban area, what we call like the urban res. And always there has always been like that question of like blood quantum and like not being invited into like not feeling like invited into spaces because like I mentioned earlier, like I'm first generation on both of my parents' side, and this false man-made border like split our people up. And because of history of rape,
mhm.
like my mom, both my parents are born in Mexico. So when they immigrated here and like my grandma was here and, you know, we were having these conversations, even as a young kid about, you know, who am I, you know, like, um, you know, and asking my grandma these questions and, you know, her dealing with her trauma. And I know it was really painful for her and, you know, for even her accepting and sharing that we were Yaqui, we're Yoeme. And that's all that my grandma said, you know, there she's like, this is my father and this is who we are. And she didn't really want to talk about anything else.
Mm, mm,
So so it has been a struggle. And like I said, like, you know, like I'm living here on Ohlone land and I have the pleasure of meeting indigenous people, a lot of intertribal people. You know, it's a very diverse community. I grew up a lot of different people from like all indigenous people from Canada, from Mexico, from like South America, you know. And it's been a pleasure to like be in solidarity with them, even our like Kanaka Maoli relatives in Hawaii. So it definitely has been a struggle, but I feel standing in solidarity and being in these spaces where we're all in collective prayer and we're just kind of falling back on our ancestors and standing in solidarity and praying for their rivers and their sacred mountains. I know that one day that I would be also praying to my sacred mountain and also be
mm.
praying for my sacred waters. So I'm just trusting the ancestors at this point, and everything just kind of has been coming to me and just kind of aligning. I don't really have like words to kind of explain that. It's just I just trust the ancestors.
Yeah, the way you say it says it all. And, you know, I'm sure Lady E can feel it also. Use the word sacred a bunch of times.
Did I really? Oh my God.
And because, you know, and I remember the first time I went, you know, Africa's a huge continent. You know, I don't know what tribe I'm from. I got to Nigeria and I was like, oh my gosh, I got off and I kissed the ground. You know, I'm like, you know, just
Right.
but what I'm hearing from you is making those connections, and you use the word sacred. It's just wonderful for you, and I'm not misinterpreting that, am I? I feel like it's just feeling your wholeness in that journey of discovery, and I'm just glad you're able to do it. It because it's your life, it's your spirit. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
And
Witko.
Lakota way, you know, Chase is a smidge bit older than me, and I know that I might touch on a few subjects that Chase will really elaborate on. So if you don't mind me going before you, Chia.
Yeah, that'd be great, bro. It's all good.
So identity is a very. I'm glad you asked that question, because I think anytime you ask any three of us in this conversation, you ask us, "What's your name?" It's hard to think in individualism, but coming from where we're coming from, it's really hard to be an individual and like talk about my accolades without talking about the people, the Oyate, where in those things in a whole as a whole. So most indigenous folks will go around and mention every chance they get will mention the struggles, they'll mention something because there's a lot. So I do come from Pine Ridge. I was born inside the prisoner of war camp, and I'm very proud. But I'm right next to Wounded Knee, and I'm in these places, and I almost feel privileged because of what happened in the past. I feel privileged to be able to text somebody and go to ceremony, to go to direct source of prayer and original prayer, the things that were taken away from our people for so long, and we weren't able to do those things. I'm just thankful for all the sacrifices that were made for me to walk down the street and do that today. But I also feel privileged because there have been natives who have been relocated, and like our relatives said, there are people across the borders, Canada, Mexico, and we even consider Africa all relatives. Everything that we learn here is we're all related. We're all related. We have Black relatives who are native. We have Latino relatives who are native. So I think as far as identity goes, there have been people mixed up in relocation, and before that, they were mixed up in residential schools. And it's all just now coming to light that there's thousands of babies who weren't able to continue their native lineage. It's very similar to the Black struggle, very similar to other struggles in the world. And I think I feel privileged to be next to the fire, next to the elders right now who are the last language speakers, and I could text them right now. And I feel like it's a responsibility that I have with my digital abilities to do something for the next generations. And I think, like I said, I'm grateful because I after everything our people have been through, I can be who I am, and I can do what I do in a good way. And I learned so much. I did grow up in gang culture, but I learned so much from my spirituality, from Oglala, from Wolakota, from who we are here in Pine Ridge in the prisoner of war camp number 334. There's so much history that could be said in this moment. But as far as identity goes, I was blessed to have been born inside the prison of war camp, and I don't know what I can't imagine what our relatives who grew up in Oakland feel like. I can't imagine, like, you're inside of the struggle there, but you're also in East Oakland. You're growing up there, not knowing your identity, and then there's so much going. The world is coming at you. You gotta make it in the city. And I feel privileged to have been next to the ceremony, hearing our relatives talk about feeling like you're not allowed in spaces, and we welcome everybody. So I feel privileged to be inside of that, and then be able to be here to see us all come together, because there's been times in the past where the lineage that Chase is coming from is the lineage that I'm talking about. He's direct descendant, and a lot of the people blessed us with perspective about world unity, about the water in the world, and those things are always said to us. So it's almost like our version of church. When we go, they always remind us. So for our relatives who don't think we think about them across those borders, and relatives who aren't connected to their tribes and their language, we're fighting too. We're here in Pine Ridge, and we're not connected. We're involved in a lot of other shit. We're involved in American culture as just as much as anybody. I'm learning my language too, and I hear it every day. So I feel for everybody out there who is Indigenous, who is struggling with identity. You always have the ancestors are always with you, and I'm privileged to know that and be told that.
Thank you, Witko. Jace.
Wow, thanks for that, man. You know what? That is yes, identity, what forms the foundations of what we think we are, or who we think we are. There's a lot of colonial concepts that have been imposed on our consciousness, like, the idea of the self, or the ego, or the soul, the way that a human being navigates their metaphysical reality, or what they think it is. We all have to recognize that, those systems, those knowledge systems, don't just exist in the English language. They existed in every, all 500 of the languages that were here
Mhm.
in the Western Hemisphere. They existed all over the continent of Africa. They existed all over what is now known as, South America or Central America, Abya Yala, and they exist wherever people are connected to the universal elements. And I speak as somebody who was born into the Lakota tradition, or the Titoan, or the Ocheti Shakomi. And what Witko is saying is very true. We take a lot of our access to those teachers and those sources that can inform us and help us on levels that, before technology, people who didn't live close to these teachers or healers or intercessors, medicine people, that's where the people are. That's where the land is. Like, we took for granted our access and our relationship with the land. And it's not till you live in a city that you're like, whoa, this is different. And we're not fully recognizing that our identities as indigenous people descend directly from the land and the waters and the cosmos, and our active relationship with those sacred elements. We all have a way to commune or to create a unitive experience. When Witko says Metakoye Oyasi, we are all related. Everything that is related to me.
Mm.
We are recognizing and conceptually creating a connection. We have a ceremony in our way of life called the Hunka ceremony, where we take relatives, we create relatives. Well, we were Hunkad, we were made relatives by what the 5%ers might call the older gods, the natural universal elements that are much, much older than us. The sun, the concept of motion, the unending motion, Mother Earth, a spirit in our way known as Iya, and the moon, the wind, the thunders. We all have there is an order that is there for us to access anytime we want. We have but to forgive ourselves and show compassion to ourselves, and not judge ourselves so harshly by those standards which were brought here by the colonizer. The things that divided us, like, oh, you're a light skin, or you're a dark skin, or you're a full blood, and I'm a half breed. I know more than you because I'm fluent in the language. All these different, it's similar to Paulo Freire's analysis in Pedagogy of the Oppressed, where we internalize all the unspoken mechanisms. Or Willie Lynch was good at this, implanting inside our minds those unspoken mechanisms and values that cause us to degrade ourselves. So we have the authority and the ability, though, to change our identities. We all have this ability and this connection. I'll say one last thing, and that is that on our paths, we learn a lot by those challenges and sometimes those sacrifices and those hardships. This is why indigenous ceremonies involve refraining from drinking food and water for 4 straight days, for instance, or dancing in the hot sun, because it gives the human being an opportunity to die to the flesh and to be reborn in spirit. and that you don't go through these processes without maybe chemically in on a DNA atomic level changing our identity, what we are. And we can do this even through hip hop, through the drum, through the songs, through frequency, through vibrations. There's a reason why we have these, and I don't even like to call them technologies, but the drum and the voice, we have the ability to, you know, expand or transcend some of our material limitations. That stuff is all related to who we are and our identities. So I wanted to say at least that much.
Man, oh, Lord. I just like, I gotta ask you, Chief.
Didn't he just drop the mic? I know that's right. Bam.
Drop the mic, brother. Drop the mic. Look. Look. I wish I had every young person in America watching this, man, because
So
you
let
don't
me
hear
say
this.
what you've just done. You've created the circle.
You
And
know what it might be, we just, you know, we've got access to ceremonies, so that's where the inspiration comes from. And
you've just created a circle, and around us sit the circle that you have created, doing the tradition that is thousands of years old, and that's telling the story, teaching through storytelling and experience and sharing. And this is how many have learned. This is how we have been taught for thousands of years. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be invited into the circle, this sacred circle that you have allowed us to participate in sharing a little bit of who you are. And I want to ask Victoria. Victoria, how are you feeling about what you've heard Chase say? What comes up for you when you hear what he said?
I definitely like have felt the connection with my body and all of these elements. You know, it's our responsibility since before colonization to take care and be in relationship with the land, with the water. You know, everything has a spirit, and for me, like speaking about like, you know, like my story, like if it wasn't for like the access to land or be able to tap back in with land, like I honestly don't know like if my life would have, you know, went left. It has definitely saved my life, and I've been in ceremonies like a run for salmon with the Windman Witko, where it's this journey all the way up from Mount Shasta, from their sacred mountain, Buyumpuyuk, and they follow the migration of the salmon back to here, the Bay Area. And it's a 2-week journey, and folks are just following the same migration of salmon, running, biking, canoeing. And so folks are like sweating, and, you know, everybody's all musty and crusty, and like, you know, you're just sharing the space, and everybody's tired, but everybody's in collective prayer and praying for the salmon relatives to like come back home. And again, that's just our relationship, reestablishing and rebuilding those relationships that have been broken because people have been ripped away from their land and people are trying to reconnect. So
it's beautiful. It is just beautiful. It's just beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, you dropped the mic, Chase. Yes. Being connected. It's beautiful.
And let me just add, I didn't hear one thing about materialism. I didn't hear anything about money. I didn't hear anything about any of those things that are supposed to be so important. And, you know, I can add that, you know, you could have been talking about the Igbo or the Ashanti or the, you know, or the Wolof or the Fere or the Zulu or the tribal cultures have this thing in complete common. where the land means so much. In fact, I know in traditional African, you know, culture, the land wasn't private. It didn't belong to anybody. There was no sense of private property. You know, the land belonged to the people. So as I'm listening to you, you know, and Chase, I had to learn all of this because you know I'm from South Central Los Angeles. You know what I know about? All I know is ghettos and hoods. You know, I don't know about this. All I know it ain't cool, right? But I had to learn all of this stuff and how all of this became and with Native people, of course, you know, I grew up on cowboys and Indian movies and you know it's all this stuff and but even then, you know, I mean, I knew it wasn't right, but I was so struck by the ceremony and the culture and the beauty of everything. And let me just say this. It's always remarkable to me how people who had just been totally oppressed, ripped off, colonized, enslaved, the wonderful and glorious things that come out of oppressed people's, you know, mouths. And sometimes I think it's just beyond colonizers. You know, they just don't get it. You know, I mean, I don't even want to go into that. If I do, somebody gonna get mad at me because I do have reasons for saying that because we just, you know, you don't think that like that, right? And for me, I always feel sad, and everybody gets to chart his or own way when people become something, and this is really a tough thing to say, so I know somebody's gonna yell at me, become something that they're not, or forget all of that, or lose all of that. Because I think that completely, you know, you can lose your way, if I can put it like that, lose your way. And listening to you is just like listening to a griot, you know.
Clearly.
Complete, anywhere, you know, it was just beautiful. And just comment a little bit on, we'll get into the other stuff about the importance of ceremony and culture, because I think, you know, that is just so, there's no, I was reading this thing about in traditional African culture, and again, when I say this, I feel like I'm talking about Native culture. There was no such thing as art for art's sake. You didn't paint a picture just to paint a picture, right? Art was a function of ceremony, right? You know, everything. Music was a function of ceremony. You didn't have a hit record. You know what I mean? It was all a function of what was going on in the village with the people. And to me, that's just I just don't, I know folks don't get that. I know they get that. So if you want to say anything, go ahead, Witko. Go right ahead.
I know. Here's another moment where I think I could hop in right before Chase drops some bombs. I just want to enter something about.
All of you are dropping bombs, by the way. Let me just say.
Y'all got 3
bombs
mics. You keep dropping them and picking them up.
Okay, he was just the last.
Got the Gap band in here, okay?
The art aspect, I'm like highly into art, and I love art, and I love the history of art in our tribe here. You know, Chase could talk a lot about the spirituality here, definitely, and I think they both intertwine, and they have intertwined in the past as far as art, vision, identity, especially in, you know, like Chase explained, there was a clear perspective of identity at one point for people, for our Oyate, we could speak for sure, right? But there's stories of the art that they made back then, in those times when they were like Crazy Horse's time, Tashunke Witko's time. There was resistance against America when they were forming these prisoner of war camps. You know, he went to war with America, with the cavalries, all the people, the Europeans who were coming to fight for the U.S. government. There's a Wild West history that does have detail, and we were doing things that are contemporary. Like it said that, you know, Tashunke Witko, Crazy Horse had right hand men. Like he had dudes that he rode with, and a lot of them were painters, and they would paint on rocks and they would paint on stuff. You think these are guys, if you can catch a picture, a black and white picture of them, they look scary, they look fierce, and and that's what the days where you had to hold a face for a long time for the picture to be taken. You know, he probably held that face for like 60 seconds straight, and he looked like he looked like he was straight ready for war. And we were always painted as that, as savages, you know, and we are still proud of that. We're proud of the fight, but we were very peaceful, very we had that perspective that Chase was talking about, and I think that's never talked about in the movies. They don't show how Sitting Bull sat down in the middle of a battlefield and said, we have to smoke this chanupa before we fight, and there's bullets coming at him. Or how Tashunke Witko picked the ice off of, I think Chase told me this story, picked the ice off of his horse's shoes and let the cavalry shoot at him and they all shot off their bullets, and then they attacked the cavalry. There's real beautiful things that happened that were a part of that art. That was an art. The way that they lived back then, the perspectives that they had back then, and we really cling to that. When you hear the story, you hear the oral stories of what they did. And when they went to war, it was magic. And I think there's a lot of magic that they don't want us to know about in our communities, across the, like everywhere, honestly, from Hawaii to the islands, to our Taino relatives, to our relatives in Mexico, to our relatives in Africa. There's a magic that they took from us. And it had a lot to do with art. It had a lot to do with what we wore, how we looked, that they tried to strip from us. So these talks come up on this day. Makes me thankful for this day. Makes me thankful that we have these conversations, and you know, the spirituality does intertwine with the art, and you know, coming from here, living down the street from where these guys went to war, and where our relatives, there's a mass grave, 20 miles from where I'm on Zoom. 300 women and children who were killed in the midst of all of it. And Chase talked about the man who's being honored. That's where Chase went to see. There's a man being honored. He had a medal from shooting those women and children here 20 miles from where I am. And that's the work that Chase usually is involved in. So he went all the way over to the East Coast to see all of that, and we are coming. We are next to ceremony, and I think that's Oglala. Where Oglala, we scatter, which technically means to scatter our own, and we scatter in 4 directions. We scatter across the world, and I think that those are our duties. I think Victoria touched on the duties of the land, like how we protect the land and our original duties. And it's beautiful to be here, and beautiful to be able to involve ourselves in those ceremonies and launch ourselves in the world. Be in East Oakland and looking for unity, talking to let's get back to our languages inside of East Oakland. There a lot of our people from Pine Ridge, where my grandmother lived in East Oakland. There's a lot of people relocated from all these reservations into those inner cities. Shout out to Minneapolis. There's still projects there. They have their own Indian center. So there's a lot of natives who were launched into those places, and they lost the connection to ceremony. And I think that's why I mentioned it's a privilege, because we do have relatives who grew up in the hood. We do have relatives who's at the sideshows who bring that back to those ideas back to the res. We also have powwows there in San Francisco, which is beautiful. And today, if this airs on Indigenous Peoples Day, there's going to be a lot of people in San Francisco celebrating, because we have a lot of. I know for sure Oglala Lakota, directly where I'm from. We're all Oakland fans. We're still Raider fans, even though they moved to Las Vegas. It's hard, We still got San Francisco fans here, and that and we hope that at some point in time our effect on the world is as big as our ancestors' effect on the world. The vision and art that they had, and the art that they did, just the actions that they had. And I think I'll let my Chie Chase touch more on the ceremonial and the spiritual aspect, because those are things we did have to fight for. And Chase's direct relatives, direct mother and father, are connected to those struggles. I am a lot younger as far as direct connection to the contemporary struggle of actually Chase's mother and father are fighters, freedom fighters. And not only that, but Chase is descended from some great people here in our lineage, and he knows a lot about the ceremony and ceremonies that happen and the meanings and whatnot. And I think I'm just privileged to be next to it. I'm privileged to be a descendant.
You know, Witko, years ago, I used this line with a young man who was doing stuff that obviously, number one, he shouldn't have been doing. Number two, he was going to end up in jail. Number three, he was killing a lot of folks, his own folks. And when I met him, it's since become sort of legendary in the circles that we run in. I told him, if you knew what I knew, you wouldn't do what you do. And he came up to me, and it was like in an auditorium. I tell you, it was actually at Castlemont High School. It was summer school. You know, he was there to get a driver's license so he could sell some more dope. And he came up to me and said, what do you know that I know that will stop me from doing what I'm doing? Because I'm good at it. And then I just, just don't ask me. If you want to know, I told you. And it was the beginning of a history lesson. It was a history lesson and he was just, I remember he sat there like, I didn't know that. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. I didn't know this. And that small history lesson turned into a who am I lesson, because he thought he was, this hood kingpin, right? I mean, that was his identity, and that was him because that's what he knew, right? And, the beginning of, there's so many of us who don't know who we really are. That was a huge question for Malcolm in prison when Bembe said to him, he said, well, who are you? And he said, my name is no. Said, who are you really? And that's why I brought up that question of identity, because if you go back, and I think I studied a little bit enough to the original people, that's not who you are. That's not who you are. You're trying to be somebody you're not, which is why you went up in a place that you shouldn't be, because you ain't very good at trying to be somebody that you're not.
Yeah, and I mean, we can't. I think I'm a victim. I hate saying I'm a victim. I hate to start with that, but like we natives, we actually are part of gang culture, which is unfortunate, and we do come from where we know our identity. But I think with colonization, all this stuff Chase touched on, like the white gaze, like how we have a gaze over the white folks got something on us, where when we get pulled over, it's like, yeah, I just got to put my wrists out. I don't have any rights. We do struggle with this contemporary time. So I don't blame the drug dealers. I don't blame the pimps. I don't blame the culture. Actually, people did what they could to survive. And we learned it from the white folks. The white folks were originally put, like my grandmother, the reason I'm light skinned is because my grandmother was like this French blood was raped into our family I almost said boarding school, I apologize, but at the Fort Robinson, which is a military base. So they took a lot of our women and did horrible things to our women.
Right.
So in these, I don't blame our men and our women for struggling in the street culture and gang culture, because these are things that the violence came from Europe. The violence was happening in Europe, and it came from Europe. And we got the guns from them. We learned how to do all this stuff. And I mean, they put it in the movies, shooting each other. So I have a soft spot for a lot of people involved in the street culture, mainly because I originally learned everything I learned from the street culture and come back to spirituality, and a privilege to be able to come back to spirituality. There's our folks are lost. Like, it's our folks in the streets are lost. I think if they were to be in tune with their spirit and look at themselves shooting themselves, Like we're literally like natives killing natives too. That's the real. That's what's that's not a conversation I want to have on Indigenous Peoples Day.
Right.
But
right.
we all suffer from contemporary. Chase talked a lot about it in real articulate terms, but we all struggle from these contemporary the things surrounding us, like you said. So I'm proud of those folks who just gave it a shot. Who, whatever it was they was doing, they didn't know they was. I think if they knew, they wouldn't hurt their own folks.
Chase used his approach was very positive to some real issues, and we could hear that and see that and feel that. And I understand that oftentimes and far too often, what's lost is the power, the intent, the ceremonies. Some like to call them rituals, but the rituals, the storytelling, we don't hear those enough. Those circles are not as often and as frequent as they need to be. But I want to say, in terms of being lost, my father wore braids. They are from Texas. And my great aunt had coal black hair, long black hair. She wore braids. They were Native American, and the story was lost. And I don't know the tribe. I don't know the language, but I did get a chance to meet my great aunt. She was the only full-blood Indian that I ever met and saw, and she was blind and she was functioning. She lived in her little house and she worked, and she did not have, but the magic and the presence, being in the presence of that woman was unbelievable. My mother saw my father's people, and his grandparents wore feathers. And I don't know the story. That history, the ceremonies, who they are, and what kept them and empowered them and enabled them to get through. I don't know those stories, but I know that the power to get through is a part of who I am. The ability to deal with and make it despite the challenges that show up, that's in our blood, that's in our DNA. The ability to be artistic, creative, move through the world, and to be connected with spirit. That's in my DNA. And I know that came from those Native Americans that I didn't get to hear the story. So to be able to be here now and hear this and feel this is just a gift from me. Thank you.
We have a saying, Chase, with our young people, we're not all related, but we're all family. But sometimes we actually are all related.
I have Native American blood running all through me.
I also want to mention too, like there's magic in, honestly, there's magic in African blood. Like there's magic that came from there, and I think that's where hip hop comes from. I think that's where all of the creativeness comes, all the beautiful things that's going on. I think that's where it comes from. It comes from the DNA, and I think that's why
African and Native American, and I got
and both of those cultures influence the world regardless of what's happened in the past.
Sure.
I just wanted to also add that, that Black folks are Indigenous. They've been ripped away. They were ripped away from, from their lands. And it has it was a lot, hearing Witko talk, and Chase talk a lot about, what it's like to grow up and struggling. I growing up in East Oakland and seeing a lot of my Native relatives, growing up as a young teenager, fall into alcoholism and drug abuse and suicide, and even coming back to the identity, for me, it was really rough, not having that connection, and also being two-spirit, being queer, you know, and that also has really like strengthened like my sense of identity, and I've been able to like fall back on that. And that's also another responsibility is, you know, it's like a lot of folks that are on the front lines, they're like two-spirit and indigenous queer folks like holding down those front lines. And you know, there's a lot of people, you know, I know in the Bay Area we live in this bubble, and like, you know, it's like I necessarily don't really feel safe sometimes when I walk outside of my house, you know, like, you know, I'm femme by default, but I'm two-spirit, and sometimes I feel like, you know, I might be too much for other people, and I don't really feel safe, you know. What was my point here? My point here is like, you know, there's other people, other relatives, you know, like even through like social media, just kind of like tapping in and kind of seeing like what's going on like here. And, you know, we have that privilege to actually like be like ourselves and be two-spirit and come back to like those gender roles that, you know, that we used to allow two-spirit, you know, there were people that led combat, you know, there were people that held ceremony, and as a two-spirit person who feels, for me, like I feel in tune both with my femininity and my masculinity, and that's what two-spirit means to me. And so it's also coming back to those like gender roles and holding it down for the future generations. So it's like, you know, we're going to continue the work that our ancestors have put in, so that it could be a little easier for like the next generation.
That's important. Yes, absolutely.
There's been so much trauma, so much pain, so much done, you know. How do you feel about that? I asked the kids in the class the other day about whether they're optimistic or pessimistic about the future. And this was just a question generally about, you know, we got COVID, and then we got and this was a group of four that I think the youngest is 14, the oldest was 20, right? That's our latest group of young people. And they're in a world unlike any other time, really. I think it's all relative, you know, I guess, but, you know, I mean, with presence of COVID and climate change, and, you know, of course, what's happening in America, which is just off the insane chain. But each of you, what do you think of the issues that need to be dealt with moving forward out of this horrendous that is, you know, that happens to people? What do you think of need to be dealt with and worked on for
Chase is definitely can answer that one, I believe.
Let me you know what, I hate to leave the cipher or the hochoka, but it's really late out here, so let me just say a few words, and then sure, if y'all will let me gracefully bow out. It's been an honor to share a bit of time and inspiration with you all. I learn a lot also from listening to, you know, my elders, and there's a, you know, I didn't grow up immersed in the ancient ceremony. I mean, I did, but my mom was impacted by the you know, this forced removal in the boarding school era. And to call it a boarding school, that's a misnomer. Like that's a euphemism that we shouldn't be. that nothing school like happened at those places. And you know, we all didn't know. We're all learning on the fly. But she left it open for me. You know, she said, "Look at," she showed me who I was. And then I kind of was just left to the wolves of the hood, or the HUD, you know, on the res, it's called a HUD, Housing and Urban Development. And we, you know, everyone who comes from that place knows the pain and the struggle really never stops. That is a foreign and imposed poverty culture that takes from us, and and causes us to grow, you know, right away as even as young people. And we're having to do all of this healing and to try to do the best we can to educate and to build bridges. And at a time when these fear, doubt, and confusion, which are successfully being used against most people in this country, in the world,
Amen.
are kind of you know, running the day and causing complacency, causing ignorance, and causing people to doubt their own power. So for like what should be done, you know, just going on your own spiritual journey, whatever that means. For some people, ceremony is waking up with the sun and finding a bit of quiet time where you can quiet your mind. Sometimes it's hearing a certain bird or a certain song, or feeling the wind, and not just feeling the wind, but recognizing your own sacred breath. You know, ceremony is many things, many different things to many different people. Just the things that you all said about art, you know, the art is our voice. It's our song. It's our dance. It's the way we express ourselves. It's everything that we go through as human beings. And even recognizing that, you know, it's okay to put our grandmothers and grandfathers on a pedestal, because we need to reinstill dignity in ourselves, in our people. But we also have to recognize that we're in our time. You know, we're not on their level, but they also didn't get the chance to conduct themselves and navigate themselves in our time. Like, this is our time. So maybe we're not on their level, but we're also in some ways responsible for greater challenges, greater evolutions, greater adaptations. So we are also blessed and given that responsibility to continue to tell our story, continue to seek the truth, and to fight for justice, because we're born into a system that is very violent. It's extractive, colonial, capitalism, all of these things. You know, we're naming them now. And for what we can do, you know, we've got to recognize that people are being born into a sense of urgency, and we got to do our best to make sure that we can pass on something that is healthier and better than what we found, you know, what we were born into. So I want to say that much, and I got to ask for permission to leave because it's late out here.
Oh, it is. Chase, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, brother.
You guys, stay strong.
We will be in touch, and I got you back. I just want you to know that we with you.
Okay, all right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Wow. Wow.
I had a feeling he was gonna drop some bombs, so I'm glad he made it.
Wow. I mean,
He's remarkable.
the learning for all of us, the wisdom, the griot, you don't hear that. You know, you just don't hear that every day. That's just the way I can say it to both of you, to all of us. You just don't hear that every day. The two of you have anything you want to add about the future to what he said, and then wrap it up.
I have a few things I wanted to say. You know, support Indigenous business on this day. That's something we could do. It's okay to celebrate. crush capitalism and
Right.
all of that. But we still need this. We still got to feed our babies. We still got to get by, and we got to, we got things to take care of. So, support Native business, support Native nonprofit, as well as Afro-Indigenous, Latino Indigenous nonprofit on this day. That's something we could do. I want to shout out a few movements that I have that I want to remember. There's the Oak Flat movement, Windsor, everybody. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to everybody fighting Line 3, Camp McGeezy, Gnu. Shout out to everybody fighting for Bears Ears, fighting for Chaco Canyon, fighting for all of these different fights. Missing and murdered Indigenous people, missing and murdered Indigenous women. People out there bringing light to the residential schools, some going and looking at all of those grave sites and realizing they're unmarked with babies, with Indigenous babies. Everybody out there coming back to their Indigenous culture, whether you're, no matter the color of your skin, no matter where you're from, coming back to your language and still looking for who you are day by day. I'm with you. I'm with everybody. Shout out to a few for-profit companies. I want to shout out, Chase didn't even mention, what's even crazier about that guy. He didn't even plug in any of the stuff he has going on, the merch. He didn't, but I do want to mention OXDX Clothing, who are just opened up a store in Tempe, Arizona. I watched those guys go from, working at a screen print shop to becoming a huge Native company. One of his hugest t-shirts, one of their hugest t-shirts is Native Americans discovered Columbus. And you can find that on oxdxclothing.com.
And that don't be all. That's what I'm talking about.
There's a lot of Indigenous-led nonprofits that focus on language revitalization, that focus on identity crisis, mental instability, homelessness, that we could look for on this day. There's a lot of cool things we could do on this day instead of being mad at Columbus, right? We could celebrate the art by buying a Native Americans discovered Columbus shirt.
I love that.
And that's a happy Indigenous Peoples Day to everybody out there. This is something we can smile, a small win. And thank you, Victoria. Thank you to Street Soldiers. I'm very inspired. I've been a fan, always been a fan. I like the show. You guys are awesome. This was an amazing conversation, and I'm just grateful to be a part of it. And I look forward to hearing it on the show. And I think if we could continue to do Indigenous Peoples Day and celebrate it here on Street Soldiers, I'd love to be a part, even just throw some mentions out there of a few other people doing things in the world.
Appreciate you, brother. Thank
We
you.
are fortunate to have you.
Got that,
Thank you
brother.
so much.
Appreciate you guys.
Yes, sir.
Victoria, you get the last word.
Okay. So what I think needs to happen now is I feel like, like in the midst of climate change, I think that folks need to look for Indigenous leadership, and particularly like here, like just in California, in the Bay Area, there's a few movements going on here. There's the protecting of the West Berkeley Shell Mound. Tomorrow for Indigenous Peoples Day, like the way that Segurite Lantras operates is through a voluntary tax. So I could drop the link on here. So rent is due settlers. And again, support Indigenous artists, support Indigenous art, support language revitalization. The Lashon Ohlone are not a federally recognized tribe, so the history books tell us that they don't exist. So always use present tense when you're speaking of Indigenous people, because we're still here, alive and thriving. And also acknowledge the land that you're on. There's a really good, helpful app, Native Land. I could drop it on the chat. But yeah, just acknowledge the land that you're occupying, and speak those names because those ancestors are listening.
Thank you.
Appreciate you, Victoria.
One more thing, land back And all us natives are in support of Black reparations. That's one thing I wanted to end with. Land back and Black reparations. We need that in 2022, especially with this U.S. dollar coming. You know, not who knows what it's gonna be worth. We want what's owed to us. You know, what's owed to Indigenous people, what's owed to Black people in the world. We want what's owed to us before we start investing in these digital currencies and before we move on and we get over all this colonizer stuff they did to us. We want what's owed to us. Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Thank you.
Exactly. And
Happy
there's
Indigenous
also,
Peoples Day to you.
yeah,
Yes.
our struggles are also intertwined with Black liberation.
Very much so.
So shout out to our Black relatives and happy Indigenous Peoples Day. And before we go, I will also like to just quickly talk about something also going on here. There's 5 people still being charged with an alleged toppling of a Junipero Serra statue, which is the colonizers that brought the mission development here to California and enslaved California.
Remember when that happened? Yeah.
So this actually happened last year on Indigenous Peoples Day, and today there was an action where Indigenous folks are trying to hold the church accountable to the atrocities they have committed. And in the West Coast in California, the history is really recent. It was only the late 1700s when the missions got here, and California natives are still suffering from those atrocities. So I just wanted to tell and encourage people to look up Indigenous Peoples Day 5 and find out a little bit about that going on. And happy Indigenous Peoples Day again. Thank you for having me here. Nice meeting y'all.
Lady E.
You know, there is so little I can say except we celebrate you. We are so grateful for you, your wisdom, your sharing, the sanctity and the sacredness of the stories, the journey, the lives that you shared, the ceremonies of wisdom, the experiences that Indigenous people, what that means, what we need to know and remember. So thank you. We appreciate you and we celebrate you. Thank you for being here.
My favorite saying, I said it before. Soul, you want to say something, Soul?
No, just saying, Pete, what's up? Thanks, y'all.
We're not all related, but we're all family. So I'm just going to say that and take the out. We are related and we are all family. This is just marvelous. We got your back. You let us know whatever we can do. You know, we're all in this together. We're all in this together. We know who like us and we know who don't. And it's that simple. We know where the hierarchy is and we know who's in it, and that's the way it is. So, but I want to thank both of you. I mean, this was a late coming together. Got to thank LD.
Oh my goodness, she looks just like me.
Got to thank you, Victoria. You came through referral, and Chase. Wow. Thank you for coming in. This is the first one, but it won't be the last one. And we'll be in touch and we will definitely do it again. So everyone, happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
Happy Indigenous Peoples Day.
All right.
Street soldiers.
Good night, y'all.
All right. Good night, guys.